Hi, my name is Jason Haerich, and I'm the author of the epic fantasy novel The Venturian Graft. The following is a random excerpt from the novel taking place in chapter 36. Crops are still coming in. Do we have any more thoughts on seasons? Toby asked as the three companions walked back to their truck to head to the fire station. While my band of young scientists are monitoring patterns daily, we also have a few weather stations that have been tracking the basics like barometric patterns, temperature, and whatnot, Mr. Phipps replied. There's been a slight dip in temperature and very minor decrease in daylight, but no recognizable patterns in the wind. Dr. Gates interjected. So we just don't know, you're saying. If you ask some of the older people, they insist bad weather is coming because knees ache or old bones are feeling a twinge here and there. Mr. Phipps, ever the logical instructor, said, well, that doesn't mean much. How much of those pains are psychosomatic, merely based on them doing things they normally couldn't do in regular gravity? Touché, Professor, Dr. Gates said with a laugh. Plus, even Jerry admits he has no idea. But things are growing fine. Toby drove the team back along the road to their base, while monitoring the different radio frequencies they had settled on for both scout and guard duty, as well as the voyaging ship. Regular reports of observations broadcast at regular intervals, and all appeared normal until he heard an unusual report. Bird has been sighted, and it looks like it's coming this way, said a scout Toby recognized as the one monitoring the southern cliff. Bastard's got to be huge. It's a ways out yet, but I can see it flying. Toby felt a mixture of excitement and concern. The very few sightings of birds had either been dismissed, identified as floating debris such as leaves swirled in the wind or local wildlife. If this held true, it would be the first outside avian recognized during the long months of isolation. He turned to his companions. I'm not going to get my hopes up, but do you mind if we take a detour over to the southern platform? Not at all. I'm game if the good doctor is, Mr. Phipps replied. Well, drive on, let's go see a birdie, confirmed the elderly obstetrician, and Toby turned on to a different road with a nod. The journey was fairly short, and they pulled next to a concrete pad that once served as a parking lot of a store that failed to stay within the diameter of their island. It now hosed a patio chair, cooler, umbrella, and a young short-haired woman. The scout turned to wave at the three council leaders and returned to her visage with the binoculars held up to her eyes. She dropped them and pointed out towards the horizon at a distant speck, and held the glasses over to Toby, who accepted them with thanks and looked through. He remained silent for several moments and held off the curious inquiries with a hand before quietly ordering, Mr. Phipps, please go grab the gun from the bed of the truck. There might be two, so get whatever's in there and bring it, and the magazines that are stored in the toolbox. He lowered the binoculars and continued, Doctor, if you don't mind, go back towards those trees and hunker down. What did you see? The doctor asked with alarm. Toby watched the teacher return, shouldering a scoped rifle and an AR-15 with his pockets bulging with ammunition. It's not a bird, he said calmly. Do you mean it's an airplane or something? The doctor asked with a tremble in her voice. No, it's an animal, just not a bird. The wings are not flapping right or something, he said. Called a precaution, it might still be fine, but I need you to head over to the trees, Doctor, and the three of us need to settle down by that wall. Mr. Phipps and the scout trotted over to the retaining wall next to a residential garden, and Toby joined them with a controlled pace. He handed the binoculars back to the scout and pressed the button on his handheld radio. Alert scouts, unknown object being tracked. Discontinue all work and maintain watch. I'll let you know when it's clear. Pushing the radio back in his coat pocket, he drew the rifle and sighted along the scope. Oh my God, the scout said, and dropped the binoculars to pick up her own hunting rifle and renew her sight. The teacher looked back to make sure the doctor had made it to the safety of the trees and checked the magazine and safety on the AR-15 before bringing it to his shoulder. The flying object had drawn much closer, close enough now to see that the wings were not avian, and the color was not one of any bird they had seen before. A mottled green flashed in the sunlight, and short, almost bisected wings flapped in twitchy, speedy motion, enabling a steady but erratic path towards the island. It flew close enough now to drop the magnification, and the three wary observers viewed the approaching animal through the iron sights alone. Don't make any sudden movements, Toby breathed quietly as the three ducked down behind the wall. They could now hear the animal's short, barking cough resembling labored breath. It suddenly stopped its approach and hovered briefly, displaying membranous skin growing taut between bony spines on each upsweep of the wings. A chill ran down Toby's spine as the creature turned, a narrow head on a long, sinuous neck, to face the people trying desperately to remain unnoticed. Looking away from the three, the creature arched its head and shrieked an ear-splitting bark, and then drew a deep breath, clearly expanding its torso as it remained hovering, less than 50 feet above the terrified observers. With a sudden snap of its neck, the animal opened its mouth to expose dagger-like teeth and a velvety red craw before a burst of flame erupted just past the jaws and into the air in a hot, billowy mass. The crack of rifle fire broke Toby's mesmerized stillness. He instinctually squeezed the trigger on his own rifle. He was joined by the crackle of AR fire to his other side, and the three continued to fire in panicked, rapid succession. Daylight was soon visible through the holes gashed in the wings of the beast, and a fine mist of blood sprayed out of impacts to the torso. The fire dissipated immediately, and after barking a final strained cry, the animal curled its wings and tumbled to the ground to slap wetly on the concrete. Toby stood and approached the animal, continuing to fire into the center mass until his magazine emptied. The scout accompanied him on his approach, while the trembling teacher ceased his fire to scan the sky once again for any unnoticed companion to the downed animal. A muffled wheeze expressed from the bloody mass, and with a final heave of its chest, it at last grew still. Toby finally forced himself to stop his finger from trying to fire and pulled the rifle from his shoulder to stare at the animal. His silent reflection was interrupted by the odd exclamation from the scout. "Holy shit, it's a damn dragon." Thank you for taking the time to listen and watch, and I hope to hear from you soon.